Why should blind and visually impaired people make art?
I think it would be awful. I mean, because I love art, I think it would be awful not to have the chance to express that.
If sighted people are doing it, why shouldn't we? It's not something that you say blind people can't do. You know, it's not like driving a car or something.
I think that we all have this really creative energy.
People who are blind or visually impaired need to develop every part of their mind as anybody who can see.
For one thing, it helps people, it gives them a chance to be creative, but I also think it helps them to learn to use their hands better, especially younger children.
Why don't you think more blind and visually impaired people have taken art classes?
Probably for the most part they haven't been made available.
I had contacted a center that does wheel throwing classes, and unfortunately the teacher there had told me he didn't feel that this was an appropriate medium for someone who was blind. He said that I really wouldn't be able to make anything that looked good, and that perhaps I should be interested in something more suited to my abilities.
When I tried to enroll in a class at a local institution in Pittsburgh, and I wanted to do a sculpture class, the man saw me and went, "But we use new models," and he wouldn't talk to me any further. He wouldn't listen to any, and at that point I was kind of put off and I didn't have many suggestions, but he wouldn't even engage in a conversation to let me think about other ways of doing art.
Touch Art is a project that's attempting to open up new art-making experiences for the blind community. So that includes the 6 workshops that we hosted in the fall of 2013, but it also includes the outreach and education to a small group of arts educators and a larger group of arts educators to really not make the process of making art classes accessible such an overwhelming, scary thing.
People want and deserve equal access to the same kinds of resources and experiences. So that was the impetus for Touch Art.
We wanted to create an environment where all the arts educators would be really comfortable asking some possibly uncomfortable questions. So we had people over, but we really talked about communication techniques that are specific to the blind community. We just went over as a group some general space navigation, verbal description, ways of specifically tailoring your language and the way that you assist people.
Through meeting and talking with people that I was re-meeting after a few years, Tammy Swantek, who's the president of BOLD, thought of, hey, you know what, an email description of classes is great, but for us to know what we're getting into and really be able to choose, we need a hands-on catalog. We need to, it would be really ideal if the teachers had their work and some samples of what they'd be teaching, and then the folks from the blind community can come and have kind of a tactile and audio tour of everything and a meeting and greeting.
Making these fiber art containers. They're kind of like baskets.
Oh yeah.
And this is the frame for it. And we're going to balance it on the edge of the mold of the frame.
We did a little bit of research into who we knew in Pittsburgh. It was a really excellent arts educator and really committed to a specific tactile, three-dimensional form.
Katie Jimen is a master paper maker. That's what she does. We wanted people that were really excelled in those mediums and also had open minds and hearts.
I'm a paper maker and I make my living as a paper maker. I've been taking Pittsburgh by storm, infiltrating all the arts organizations and trying to make paper with everyone.
The paper making workshop was a wonderful one-day workshop that led participants through the process of making 3 different types of paper. We had a specific pulp, and we went over different types of tactile materials that could be in the paper, and then we had tactile elements embedded in the paper pulp to create a really interesting paper surface.
The paper making teacher was able to give really in-depth descriptions on the entire process. It was a really great experience.
So the next class was Precious Metal Clay Jewelry with Donna Penoyer, and it was in 2 parts. Donna provided a very intricate and challenging class.
What we did was to make some metal clay pendants from bronze metal clay. And so I was introducing what metal clay is, how to fire it, and how to make components from it, and then to start to join those components together into 3-dimensional objects. I started off my session by telling everyone how nervous I was, and I was really surprised to hear them say, "We're nervous too." And so we all laughed, and we were on common ground.
One of my favorite memories, and I think you have footage, is when Donna laid out all of her completed pieces, and we basically had a mini gallery show that was touch oriented, and again makes me think now it's also the step to make more art shows accessible in a tactile manner.
The ceramics class with Tracy Donahue was a 2-part workshop that looked at the textures in clay. It was a really playful opportunity for exploration of the material. So Tracy invited people to do some gestural interpretations of form, and people made bowls and played with different textures, and I mean, it was really an exploration more than it was working towards having a really finished, clean ceramics product. It was really an introduction to the material.
It was just really interesting to me to see how what they did with the material that I just take for granted anymore. Some of the people that had already done it and were excited to get back into it, that was fun to watch. Other people that were afraid to touch it, that was fun to watch and fun to encourage them.
My favorite, I think, was the clay class. It was nice to find out that I could, instead of working in 1 dimension, I could work in 2 dimensions. I hadn't worked with clay since high school, and I forgot that could be so much fun. And so if I ever can't paint, that gives me some other thing to know that I could do with my life.
So the last workshop was with Amanda Gross, who is a fiber artist and the person behind Knit the Bridge. And Amanda came up with a very interesting vessel project, which involved weaving and ways of embellishing that weaving with different objects and things that were personal to people.
The students worked with there's a material that is used by florists, and then the students could choose different fibers and start creating their vessel by wrapping those fibers around the wired structure. Different students chose different approaches based on either different fiber choices, different color choices. There's also variation in size, so some folks wanted to work smaller, and then other folks chose like a more open, larger kind of feel to the piece.
Some of the feedback from the participants and even blind people who had taught fiber art was, hey, you don't really need this particular accommodation, but you know, this is how we do it. So again, I think just this overarching theme is that this wasn't us teaching blind people, this was a mutual learning experience.
This project, even though it's coming to an end, is really a beginning point for future accessibility and opportunities for blind people and visually impaired people in Pittsburgh to be able to make art and to be able to attend a workshop, maybe one that's not specifically tailored for the blind community, but maybe just a workshop at the PCA or anywhere, and find success and find instructors that are willing to be creative with those accommodations, and it's not a scary, overwhelming process.
It does require some training. It does require a few extra steps and different steps. Not even necessarily extra, but different. One of the wonderful parts of that training is hearing from the teaching artists how this experience has enhanced their teaching overall.
I'm going to think a little bit more about showing the respect to the tools and the placement of the tools and knowing where to reach for them. This teaching experience made me think more about being specific and descriptive. So that was helpful to think and plan a little bit more ahead of time about how I might describe something or give directions.
I might incorporate something with blindfolds if I ever taught again, and not, really try to, just do an experiment with limiting things to touch.
I'm working with a group of seniors right now, and there are two people in my workshop who are, one is slowly going blind. She has macular degeneration, and the other one she's old. She can't see very well. And in my descriptions of the materials and in the supplies that I'm offering them, I find that I tend to feed them some of the more textured things, and they're responding nicely to that, to the tactile aesthetic that someone who's visually impaired seems to have.
Describe your touch art experience.
When I was young, I didn't mind going to talk to somebody and saying, well, I would like to take this class, but I'm visually impaired, so we might have to make some adaptations. But I didn't have to do that here, and that was fine. That was great.
I didn't feel like anybody acted like we were blind or stupid. You made it joyful, and the teachers made it joyful because of what they did and didn't do. I'm used to some relatives who act like I can't be trusted in a kitchen with a knife, and if I'm slower doing something, they want to take it over. So that was my expectation, that people would be that way, and I'm glad that they weren't.
How can art organizations make art classes accessible to blind people?
I think the instructors, first of all, have to be open to the fact that a lot of this stuff can be performed by blind and low vision people. And just like the blind people themselves, I'm sure a lot of teachers haven't even thought about how it could be done. Sometimes it's helpful if the teachers try to do whatever it is with their eyes closed and see what happens.
If you don't know, ask questions. Because we have knowledge you don't, and you have knowledge we don't.
I think first to advertise them. Like, I wouldn't have known about this had it not been for a friend of mine telling me. But I think that art organizations or art teachers need to learn that blind people and visually impaired people can do art and appreciate it, being blindfolded, so they have some awareness of how it's different to use your hands.
There are a lot of other museums in different parts of the country that have accessible art classes that are specific for people who have different abilities. I think that Pittsburgh has such a rich culture in the museums. We definitely should be able to step up.
The potential is there with blind people in terms of creativity as much as it is with sighted people, but you've got to be given the chance to allow those creative ideas to come out.
Teachers need to be made aware of how blind people could be included in their classes.
Letting people know that if they have blind people in their classes, we're not an insurance risk, we're not going to create havoc, we're safe to work with.
Oh my goodness, this comes out. This clay is marvelous. Look at this. It looks like metal. That's amazing.
Touch Art was a project of Creative Citizen Studios. Touch Art was made possible by funding from the Golden Triangle Council of the Blind and the Sprout Fund.